as the children in the park screamed. Helen looked in the direction of the noise. Lucy was lying on the ground, whimpering, and an imposing figure in a police uniform stood beside him, looking more irritated than concerned. In one cruel instant, this officer had lifted his foot and kicked Lucy aside. Helen sat on a wooden bench under the shade of a towering oak tree. The late afternoon sun cast dappled patterns on the grass, and children's laughter filled the air. For a moment, it felt like the world was perfectly at peace. Helen took a deep breath, letting the gentle breeze ruffle her hair as she watched Lucy, her small, fluffy companion, sniff around the park's green expanse. Lucy had been with her for 3 years, ever since her husband's passing. In many ways, he was her anchor, a bundle of love who never failed to make her smile, no matter how hard life got. However, a sudden, jarring cry tore through the peaceful sounds of the park. Startled, Helen looked in the direction of the noise. Lucy was lying on the ground, whimpering, and an imposing figure in a police uniform stood beside him, looking more irritated than concerned. In one cruel instant, this officer had lifted his foot and kicked Lucy aside. Helen's heart nearly stopped when she realized what had happened. "Why would you do that?" she screamed, dashing toward Lucy. Tears blurred her vision. She dropped to her knees in the grass, scooping Lucy into her arms. His shallow breathing and limp body sent waves of panic through her. The officer, arms crossed, mumbled something about the dog getting in his way. But Helen barely heard him. All she could think of was getting help as fast as possible. Ignoring the onlookers who clamored for explanations and turning a deaf ear to the officer's half-hearted justifications, Helen sprinted out of the park. It felt like an eternity to cross just a few city blocks to the nearest veterinary clinic. Her heart was pounding in her head, each thump echoing her terror at the possibility of losing Lucy. Helen burst through the clinic doors, breathless and frantic. "Help! Someone please help my dog!" she cried. The receptionist instantly recognized the urgency in her voice. 2 veterinary assistants raced over, gently taking Lucy from Helen's trembling arms. "Stay here, ma'am," one of them instructed. "We'll do our best." As they disappeared into the examination area, Helen sank into a chair. Every moment felt like an endless stretch of dread. She pressed her hands together, silently begging for a miracle. Other pet owners in the waiting room watched with sympathy, though Helen was only vaguely aware of them. She kept her eyes fixed on the swinging door Lucy had vanished behind, praying for good news. The veterinarian emerged, his expression somber. Helen felt her stomach twist. "Lucy has severe internal injuries," he explained gently. "His ribs are fractured, and there may be significant organ damage. We can operate, but his chances aren't good. If the pain is too great, sometimes the kindest option is euthanasia." Those words struck Helen like a physical blow. She inhaled sharply, shaking her head. No, you can't put him down. He's not just a dog, he's family." Her voice trembled with desperation. The vet looked sympathetic, but also pragmatic. Under normal circumstances, euthanasia might indeed have been the most humane choice, sparing the animal a prolonged struggle. But Helen refused to accept this outcome without trying everything possible. In a sudden burst of determination, Helen decided she wouldn't give up. If this clinic was unwilling or unable to try another avenue, she would find someone else who would. Without signing any paperwork, she insisted they return Lucy to her. Although the staff cautioned her about his fragile state, Helen pressed on, gently cradling him. Even if there was only a shred of hope, she intended to chase it. Out on the street, uncertainty gnawed at her. Where can she find a clinic that can save Lucy? She hailed passing cars to no avail, panic welling up until a stroke of luck arrived in the form of a small delivery van pulling over. A middle-aged delivery driver noticed Helen's distress and asked what had happened. Between sobs, she explained how Lucy had been injured, and how she needed to get him to another veterinary clinic. Fast. The driver's face softened with sympathy, and he motioned for her to get in. As he drove, Helen cradled Lucy in the back seat, whispering words of comfort. She refused to let him slip away, stroking his ears gently, as if physical closeness alone could will him to keep fighting. Despite the tears and fear, she felt a faint spark of hope flicker. Human kindness was still alive in the world. Arriving at the second clinic, Helen practically stumbled in, calling for immediate help. The veterinarians here recognized the emergency and came up with a plan. They ran tests and discovered severe bleeding and potential organ ruptures. An emergency operation was needed, but it was risky, with a slim survival rate. The head veterinarian explained they had an experimental procedure that might stabilize Lucy's internal injuries. However, there was no guarantee. He handed Helen a stack of paperwork, consent forms, waivers, and disclaimers that spelled out every grim possibility. Reading the words, "limited chance of survival," made her chest tighten. Yet Helen signed. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen, but there was no question in her mind. She would choose hope over despair. For several agonizing hours, Lucy was in surgery. Helen paced the waiting room, the echo of her footsteps mingling with the hum of fluorescent lights. Other pet owners came and went, some offering her gentle smiles of encouragement. The passing of time felt distorted. A minute felt like an hour, and an hour felt like an eternity. At last, a surgeon stepped out. "He's stable for now," she reported. "We repaired what we could, but the next 48 hours are crucial. If he makes it through this, he'll still need ongoing, specialized care." Relief flooded Helen's body. She crumpled into a chair, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. Even a glimmer of hope was enough for her to keep fighting. The clinic staff placed Lucy in intensive care, hooked up to IV drips and monitors that beeped steadily. Helen spent every possible moment at his side. Gradually, the news improved. His breathing grew less labored, and his pain seemed to diminish. 2 days later, Lucy managed a tiny wag of his tail when Helen stroked his fur. That one small gesture of affection changed everything. "Did you see that?" Helen exclaimed to a nearby nurse. The nurse smiled. "He's a fighter." Although heartened by Lucy's resilience, Helen soon faced another harsh reality. The bill was rising quickly. The initial surgery, the follow-up treatments, the medication, every additional day in intensive care meant a bigger financial burden. Helen had lived on a modest pension since her husband's passing, and now she realized she had to make difficult choices. She began selling items she no longer used, her husband's old tools, antique furniture inherited from her mother. Each piece she parted with felt like losing another small piece of her past. Yet she never hesitated. "Lucy's life is worth more than any possession," she told herself. As weeks turned into a month, Lucy grew steadily stronger. He could sit up on his own, and he recognized Helen's voice with perky ears. Their bond, already strong, transformed into something deeper. Every moment felt precious. Helen found herself smiling more, just watching Lucy sleep, grateful for the simple fact that he was still breathing. At night, she would sit by the small cage they kept him in to restrict movement. She recalled the last days of her late husband's life and felt a strange feeling. Once again, she was a caretaker, hanging on to hope in the face of uncertainty. But this time, she felt stronger, guided by Lucy's unwavering will to live. As Lucy's health stabilized, Helen turned her attention toward seeking justice. She felt a surge of anger and determination each time she recalled the police officer's callous expression. With the help of an animal rights organization, Helen filed a lawsuit for animal cruelty. She braced herself for a long, complicated legal battle. When the case went to court, Helen was both nervous and resolute. Witnesses from the park stepped forward to describe the officer's inexcusable actions. The judge, moved by Lucy's ordeal, ruled in Helen's favor. The officer was found guilty of animal cruelty and was ordered to cover all of Lucy's medical expenses. He also faced disciplinary measures within the police department. Tears of relief and vindication streamed down Helen's face as she exited the courthouse. It felt like the first step toward ensuring that no other innocent animal would suffer at the hands of someone meant to uphold the law. Despite her legal victory, Helen couldn't shake the memories of that terrible afternoon. She began to avoid the street leading to the park, her anxiety spiking whenever she was near it. The memory of Lucy lying helpless on the ground, kicked by someone who had sworn to protect the public, was too painful to revisit. Instead, she funneled her energy into Lucy's continued care and rehabilitation. Slowly, she developed a daily routine: gentle massage, short walks once he could move better, and frequent checkups at the clinic. Each day, Lucy's eyes shone a bit brighter, and his spirit seemed to return. Recovery, however, was not linear. Lucy had occasional setbacks, unexpected fevers, difficulty walking, bouts of pain that left him whimpering in the night. Every time Helen thought they had turned a corner, something seemed to drag them back, but she never left his side. She set up a soft bed by the living room window, where Lucy could bask in the morning sunlight. At times, she would doze off in a chair beside him, worried that he might need her in the middle of the night. This unwavering devotion only strengthened their bond, each crisis turning them into an even more inseparable pair. During long nights, Helen found herself reflecting on the nature of unconditional love. Lucy had been there for her when she was at her lowest, after losing her husband. Now it was her turn to return that devotion. She realized that Lucy's innocence and trust placed a responsibility on her shoulders, to fight for him as he had once brought light into her life. Helen marveled at how, despite the darkness of the situation, Lucy had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, compassion, and the inherent goodness in people, like the delivery driver and the second clinic's staff, who had stepped up to help a stranger in need. Just when Lucy's health seemed to have stabilized for good, fate dealt a cruel hand. Late one evening, he began to struggle with his breathing. Panicking, Helen rushed him to the emergency clinic. They worked through the night, attempting to address organ complications that had arisen from the initial trauma. Despite the staff's best efforts, Lucy's little body was too exhausted to fight any longer. At dawn, Lucy passed away peacefully in Helen's arms. In that devastating moment, she clung to him, tears blurring her vision. All she could do was whisper words of gratitude for the time they had shared. The clinic staff, who had grown fond of Lucy, offered her words of comfort, but nothing could ease the crushing sense of loss. In the weeks that followed, Helen found herself wandering around the house in a fog of grief. Every corner reminded her of Lucy: the small mat by the door, the squeaky toy under the couch, the half-finished bag of treats in the pantry. She couldn't bring herself to throw anything away. Desperate for an outlet, Helen began to write. She wrote about the day she first found Lucy abandoned in an alley, how he had brought her solace after her husband's death, and how that tragic day in the park nearly tore them apart. Day by day, her notes turned into chapters, and chapters turned into a manuscript. The process was painful, but it was also healing. Friends who read her draft urged her to publish it. It's a powerful story, they said, one that deserves to be told. After much deliberation, Helen sent it to a small press specializing in animal welfare and personal memoirs. Months later, her book, titled Lucy's Light, hit the shelves. To Helen's astonishment, it quickly found an audience. Letters and emails poured in from across the country, even from abroad. People shared stories of their own pets, their struggles with loss, and how reading Helen's words reignited their appreciation for the simple presence of an animal companion. Some wrote to say they had visited an animal shelter for the first time, moved by Helen's devotion to her dog. Others had faced similar incidents of cruelty and found the courage to seek justice. Every letter reminded Helen that Lucy's story was so much bigger than their personal tragedy. It was a narrative of hope, resilience, and the profound bond humans share with their pets. Over time, Helen found that memories of Lucy no longer filled her with paralyzing sadness. Instead, they brought a warmth to her heart. Each recollection, Lucy's enthusiastic greetings whenever she returned home, his curious sniffs during their walks, the gentle way he'd lay his head on her lap, became a cherished gem of gratitude. On a crisp morning, she visited the park for the first time since the incident. She took slow steps toward the place she had once avoided. The scene was calmer than she expected. Birds twittered in nearby branches, and the grass shone with morning dew. She could almost see Lucy bounding through the grass, tail wagging, eyes bright with excitement. In that moment, Helen felt Lucy's presence as strongly as if he were right beside her. Their connection, she realized, transcended physical form. It was a bond woven from love, loyalty, and every shared moment. She closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her, no longer painful, but a testament to life's capacity for beauty, even in the face of loss. Standing there, Helen reflected on how much had changed. She had learned to fight for what she loved, to trust that people could be kind, and to cherish the fragility of life. Lucy's journey might have ended, but the lessons he imparted would guide her forever. Walking away, she felt lighter, as though a gentle, comforting presence lingered by her side. In the distance, children played with a happy golden retriever, chasing after a frisbee. Life went on, full of laughter and hope, and in Helen's heart, Lucy's memory shone brightly, a symbol of courage, compassion, and unwavering devotion. A story that can help you overcome all difficulties. If it touches your heart, send us the emoticons in the comment section below the video. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories. Thank you for being with us.